Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Hupp, Artistic Director of Syracuse Stage. Welcome to Prologue, which is our behind-the-scenes conversation with all the plays we do. And there goes my cat. Just as we said, my cat would make an appearance in this video. Just as we do for all the plays at Syracuse Stage, we want to give you some inside, behind-the-scenes scoop about how we create the work. And we're so fortunate. One of the silver linings of our pandemic pause and the theater we're creating during that pause is that, unlike if we were at the theater a half an hour before curtain, we have the opportunity to speak with our cast and all the folks who are really involved in the creation of the play. And ordinarily, they'd be busy backstage getting ready to do the show. And yet, here they are today. I'm joined by Dawn Stern and Stephan Wolfert, our cast for Annapurna. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us for this prologue. And to Dawn and Stephan, thank you for joining us for this conversation that gives us some insight into the creation of Annapurna. And so to our audience, if you have read the press release or visited our website about this play, I'm guessing that you're unfamiliar with Annapurna. I'm guessing that maybe you don't know Shar White's play. I wasn't familiar with it until about 9 months ago when we were looking, as we were reimagining our reimagined season and looking for plays that could work under the context and conditions that we need to work in right now. Specifically, many of you know that the Actors Equity Association, the Actors Union for Professional Actors in the United States, said back in November that they weren't comfortable with us bringing actors to Syracuse, so they weren't comfortable with us bringing actors to work in the Archbold Theater. And so since that time, we've had to create theater in people's homes or outside of Syracuse. Those are the conditions that we have to work under if we want to produce professional theater right now. As we continue to sort of climb out of this pandemic, as we start to see a little bit of light at the end of our tunnel, we still need to work under the conditions that the union allows. And so we set out to find plays that we thought would work in actors' homes. You remember, audience, that just a few weeks ago, you saw our production of Twilight, Los Angeles, 1992, which we filmed in our actors' home in Chicago. Here we are with Annapurna, a play set in a recreational vehicle. I'm a big fan of Shar White, the playwright. And so he created a play that had an off-Broadway run back around, I think, around 2013. And it's a play set in a recreational vehicle. The characters, two actors who are a divorced couple. And the play takes place when the ex-wife appears unexpectedly at the doorstep of the recreational vehicle of her ex-husband, who is living sort of on his own out in kind of the middle of nowhere in Colorado. And that's how the play opens. And I won't give away too much of the plot, since I think it's fun to watch the show and see how the plot evolves. But I'm so glad, Dawn and Stephan, that you were able to take the time to join us today. I know you have a busy schedule. And I mentioned earlier on that this play takes place in a recreational vehicle. And we also are required to film plays in people's homes. So talk a little bit about how we reconciled that.
You want to go? We shot. We live in a sort of RV. I say sort of because it was a Mercedes Sprinter van. It was a delivery vehicle for a company called Madame Paulette's, which still remains faintly.
What were they delivering?
Garments. They were a garment cleaning and storage facility, and from what I gathered.
Restoration. So if you had a wedding dress that you wanted cleaned and wanted to be able to store for 25 years to give to your daughter, this is the company you would call. They pick up the dress from you, they clean it, they wrap it and deliver it back to you.
So we bought it used, really inexpensively, converted it to an RV, or they call them, a boondock, to high covert IV. So on the exterior, it just looks like a van, but inside it's a tiny home apartment. And so we live in that and have for 3 years this month.
Yeah, March, the end of this month will mark 3 years that we left our Brooklyn rent and moved into this vehicle for a lot of reasons, really. Not the least of them to be able to work around the country in different communities. And that has to do with our nonprofit, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. But it really allowed us a freedom, and also allowed us to be together rather than one person staying in New York to earn money to pay the rents that are in New York, and the other person going out on the road and spending a lot of time apart. We saw Stephan's show, Cry Havoc, had a lot of bookings coming up, and it meant a year really away from him, or I could have an opportunity to go with him. But in order to do that, we had to reduce our overhead. So the van was really a plan, part of a plan.
It was a 1.5-year plan that turned into a 3-month plan.
Well,
and then we were in it. And then I don't know if you want us to tell how when you pitched it to us.
Go ahead. Yep.
I think, were we still here? We were about to head west. We had finished up the semester and the residency through TCG that I had, the Fox Foundation Fellowship through TCG and with Syracuse Stage with you, Bob. And we were packing up, and you had asked for a Zoom meeting. You said, there's this play, Annapurna. Do you know it? No. Well, it takes place in a trailer or an RV. It's a couple. They're in their 50s. Do you see where I'm going with this? And we're like, yes, go on. So yeah. So then and we shot it. I'm sure you're going to talk about how you set it up. But for us right now, this is what, look, I'm not just saying this because we're on this prologue, but we love you. We love Syracuse Stage. So of course, when you call to say, do you want to work with us? Our answer is always yes. And on top of it, this was such a fantastic challenge given what's going on right now, because 98% of our peers aren't working right now. They're struggling and really, really struggling. So a gig is awesome. Plus, how do we make theater right now? And one of the things that I think theater is at its core is a problem solver. Right? How do we overcome these insurmountable obstacles? And right now we have them that are outside the stage, just to allow us to be inside the stage. So to have you come to us with this idea of, we're gonna do this setup and you just got to do it. It's something we hadn't done before, not in that fashion. And as we discovered, way more challenging than we ever imagined. But so, I mean, come on, it was incredible. It was like, oh, we can make theater. We can figure out a way to make it happen almost no matter what's going on. I mean, look at I'm a big Shakespeare guy, so the Elizabethans were dealing with the theaters being shut down all the time. I always wondered, what did they do? They were making theater somehow, somewhere that we don't know about. Well, you created a version in our modern plague that we can do this.
We used to when we went into the van, we used to joke. We had this joke, we're traveling minstrels. And then we really made that so, doing theater in different communities, but we never thought we would be doing it inside the van.
Yeah.
And
I had dreamed about it. I'd wanted to.
Yeah. I think we're also very fortunate because the reason so many of our compatriots are in trouble is because they're trying to, with no work, maintain those rents in New York. Very, very challenging. So we were so lucky to not have that overhead and to have the van. It gave us a freedom. And then normally in any normal times without the pandemic, you'd never really want anyone to necessarily shoot in your home.
Right.
It's just a lot. But in this case, it was just, it was something about the challenge of it, the play itself hitting so close to home in many tangents, other than we are not divorced. We are married, it'll be 13 years next month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you work that stuff out? I mean,
Yeah.
there's we're all over the place, Bob. So wrangle us in
It's all
at
good.
any point.
We're great. We're good.
But that is among the many things that people ask us about living in this full time. There's all the logistical stuff, like how do you shower, how do you use the restroom, all that stuff. But you can tell couples because they say, well, how do you work things out? Because you can't storm off. You can't go into the kitchen and work for an hour just to cool off or go off to a separate room. You have to work it out. And it was a change because we had, being gig artists, we're married now going on 14 years, but sometimes we're apart for a year and a half at one point. And when we saw each other, but we lived apart because of work for a year and a half. So now we're together every moment of every day, which I'm not just saying because she's here. It's awesome. She's my favorite human in the world. But then when we have strife, we had to figure out a new way to work it out. And for Mr. Passive aggressive, choke it all down, everything's fine, everything's fine. I learned very quickly that I had to voice things and I had to be willing to receive it when she voiced things. And it was like the greatest marriage counselor on earth. For real.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
In a way, it's like our play. We have a 90-minute play where the two of them might as well be in a submarine submerged in the bottom of the ocean because you can't leave. There's a few times when one of the characters might step outdoors, but that's what this whole play is about, is resolving 20-year-old issues between these two people who are stuck in a tiny little space. You mentioned, obviously we're in your home, you live in the RV, and I just want to make sure our viewers know when they watch the film, they have a beautiful recreational vehicle that they were kind enough to let us transform and make significantly more dilapidated than the home they live in. I just want to make sure we're clear about that when people watch the film. I feel sorry for you.
right, yeah. No, she did an amazing job.
Well, it's also now with Nomad Land, everyone's so concerned about us. They think we're freezing in winter. We have heat. We have heat. We are not living quite like Francis.
Oh no, we live. It's an RV, and so people have a vision. But this is cabinetry made by Brian Judd at Casecraft, who I know from Broadway, who does this for a living. They're gorgeous.
It's beautiful.
Your team Mara had put contact paper on to make it. We have heat. We have AC. We have everything you have in your home for the most part.
Just tiny.
Just small.
Well, you mentioned the residency, Stephan, and just so our viewers know that Stephan and Dawn were here all through the fall and winter, creating a new play, The Head of Richard, which continues to stay in development, and working on two other plays that they've been adapting for two-person performance and solo performance. And we were very excited to be part of the Fox Foundation Theater Communications Group fellowship that made it possible for Stephan to be in residence. Many people got to see the workshops as they were evolving. The students in our drama department benefited from Stephan teaching courses, which you are continuing to do this semester as well. And so, we're very fortunate that we have two actors who live in a home that has wheels, and that they are able to move that home around. That was something that doesn't happen every day. Of course, our viewers will also know that Stephan was in Pride and Prejudice a couple seasons ago, although looking a little different. Than he looks today, a little furrier than he was in Pride and Prejudice. But it's always, we're so glad. I was so pleased when I read Annapurna. And because it was a two-hander, because it was 90 minutes long, because it didn't involve a lot of costume changes or set changes, and because I thought it was such a compelling story and so well crafted, I thought, oh, this would be perfect. And then immediately, of course, I was so nervous. You referenced that call where I called you guys up, because I had already decided that if you guys said no, I was going to bag the project entirely. Oh, wow. Because, my list of friends, I wanted you to do it, but my list of friends and colleagues who live in an RV and are also amazing actors is surprisingly fairly short. It's not a lengthy list.
Oh, great. We've cornered a market.
Right.
Yes.
You do have plays in RVs that have to be filmed in a home. You
Yeah.
guys are kind of like the A-list.
We got it.
Yeah,
We made an A-list.
that's right.
That's right.
I'll take
But yes, and I also will tell our viewers, at no point during the entire rehearsal process were we ever in the same room. You guys drove by the house after the show closed, and we talked in the yard for a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the only time we've actually physically seen each other.
Yeah.
Our staff was all working remotely. We have the wonderful Kate Freer, who is our video editor. She's in the city in New York. She's doing edits that we're as we talk now, we're in post-production, getting ready to release the play here in a couple of days. That's where we are at this moment in time. But we went in, we temporarily converted their into more of a rundown home than they live in. And then we placed 3 cameras in the van, and then we got out of the way. And so in some ways, there's a reality show feel to this play because we watch from different angles inside the van. It's very up close and personal. And it's theater. This production that our viewers will see is linear. We start at the top of the show and we run through the show. We didn't tape it 20 times and piece the best scenes together or stop and shoot for a camera angle. We placed the cameras, they're stationary, and these guys we did the play. It starts at the beginning, it goes through to the end, and that's the edit that folks will see. So there is that, we are using theatrical convention and theatrical vocabulary told through a new technology lens, or the technology that we can create theater with right now. So that's the world that our audience is experiencing, seeing the characters that you guys bring to life so well. And so here's the question for you guys. Obviously, you're married in real life. You're playing a married couple or a divorced couple in the play. This couple has a lot of baggage. Mm-hmm. As actors, how do you approach that? I mean, is it sometimes is life imitating art? I mean, how do you're living together all the time? You're at home together, and then you come to the theater and you transform into 2 other characters also who don't ever leave each other's side. Yeah. How surreal is that? What's that process like? How do you make it work?
We knew right away, and this is also part of the work of Decruit, but we knew we would need a ritual. We've worked together. We met in the Scottish play, so we met working together. And we worked together for about a year and a half of different productions before we even started dating. We were friends, so we've worked together for even longer than we've been. The
entirety of our relationship.
Yeah. So we learned how to do it, and one of the things that we knew was going to be necessary was this ritual that we create before and after every day of work, and that is, and it's borrowed from internal family structures or somatic experiential workshops, if anyone had any experience with SE. And that is, I would say, I enroll as Emma, which is the name of the character that I'm playing.
And I would say I enroll as Ulysses, my character. We breathe together, ground, and create little rituals. Sometimes it would grow. And then at the end of the day, of the shooting day, we would do the same thing.
I would say I de-enroll as Emma, I'm Dawn.
I de-enroll as Ulysses, I'm Stephan. So that way we can talk about it when we get home as actors and as a couple and not as the characters. And it might sound, woo-woo, but it really, we learned it again from the mental health world, and we've used it in the past, but we really had to turn it on here. We've done it for, like, when we worked on Richard III, I had to do it so that I didn't go home and carry this guy into our apartment. And she plays so many different characters, one of which is Richard's mother, and she plays all the women and all the other men, but the mother in particular, which is our take on this one, So we had to separate that. So the ritual helped us trick our own brain and our body into going, oh, okay, I'm no longer tapping into that. But if I can hop in though, but then on stage, yeah, I mean, this is part of what, our friend Yvette Nolan describes as the medicine of theater, of taking whatever is happening in that moment and putting it right into it. So there were so many times when I was frustrated, and it was sometimes with myself over, the line, or frustrated with, something that I had put, something that happened for me. I might have thought it was about the other person, but to be able to put it on the line in the character in the moment helped release it so that it was said. Because I'm in some ways I'm a lot like Ulysses. We've been sober the same amount of time. Sorry, I'm hoping I'm not giving a spoiler, but there are things where we're very similar, but then there are things to where, he's someone that I loathe in some ways. So how do I adopt that for the production, for the play? And that's where that ritual comes in, to be able to give that to, my wife on stage and go all in and not hold back at all, because we had that ritual to leave it behind as well.
Yeah. It's just really important and I wish I knew. I've got to pull this article so I can actually reference it properly, but science is proving actually that your body on stage going through that doesn't know the difference. Your mind knows you're acting, but your body doesn't know. So when you get worked up and you're crying or you're upset or you're screaming, your body doesn't know you're acting. So the ritual becomes really important to separate those things and to go home and to actually be able to have a conversation, an objective conversation about something you're working on or something you want to try.
And not live in the distress. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but the physical distress that my character is going through, that to not take that home. And I would find that I would get home sometimes and have some carryover pains, psychosomatic or whatever you want to call it, but to release that and go, okay, stop, we're okay, to remind our bodies, but especially in the relationship in particular.
There are times, when we're making this play in the RV, and the camera is seemingly 6 inches from you. I mean, it's really up close and personal. Is there a difference in your approach as actors? Because particularly when you're working on, Shakespeare, which is, big, bold choices and everything, there's no real subtext, in Shakespeare. It's right there for us to see. And there's a lot of subtext in a play like Annapurna, a lot of things that aren't being said when other things are being said.
Yeah.
And did you approach doing this play in your own home with your own spouse? Did you approach this any differently than you would a play in the Archbold Theater, a stage play for an audience of 500 live night after night? Any different approach? Is it different, similar?
Yeah, the initial approach in terms of the relationship with the script, the character, the doing research, the things said about me, the things I say, the initial approach, memorizing and all of that. No, that wasn't different. But once we got into the space and also rehearsing with you over Zoom for people, I don't know if I have words to adequately say, well, I will just say this. I don't know any of the people professionally working that I work with that necessarily choose theater for monetary reasons, right? So for me, it's all about this energy exchange, this cohesive feeling, being moved, learning things that happen in relationship. So I'm used to that presence even in rehearsal, the director is not with you alone. There's crew, there's assistant director, there's other cast members. So what became different, was getting to set, not necessarily the pre-work, which was a lot the same, but getting to set and not having that energy, not having any bounce back, that required something different. And I have done, I worked for 16 years in Los Angeles. I did a lot of television in the late 90s, the late 1900s, as the kids say. In the late 90s and the early 2000s, and some film, but theater was where I started before I ever moved to Los Angeles. Theater, getting my equity card in St. Louis and Chicago. And I was really struck how what we did with Annapurna was not the theater that I was accustomed to, and it was not the television work that I was accustomed to. Because in television, the cameras follow you, they move, or they have the ability to dolly and move, and they're gonna set up the shots, and they're gonna do it as the scene or the monologue or anything as many times as they need to get a clean copy with sound and lights and acting. But that's not what we did here. As you said, it was much more like theater, where you're getting one shot, and whatever happens is what happens. And the cameras being so close, that does happen in television, where they come in, but they move, and you learn to deal with that. And you're still having, in television, there's still 25 producers watching you, other cast members watching you, the camera person, there's still people right there. That's just not what this was. So I really found, we talked about this a little bit. I felt like a beginning actor, where I didn't know. I was like, oh, there's the camera, but it's not moving, but I can't look at it. But wait, I felt very insecure. And I really began to realize how much that energy from audience members means in the performance as you're going.
Even crafting the performance. I second. We talked about it a lot. In terms of approach, I think I agree completely. Getting there into the space, no, really not much difference at all. But yeah, I agree with Dawn that the dress rehearsals and previews and all of that are where we find out what I've created to this point with everyone else, what's working and what isn't. And there wasn't as much of that, there was none of that in the space. But I mean, you would give us notes, but they felt like notes in interstellar space. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, and we got, I will say this, we're pros. We've both been doing it more than 2 decades. So, you learn quickly that I can't see the camera behind her, so I have to cheat. And it's about, how the cheating as far as finding your light, finding the audience, just had to adjust it to the camera. And Kate and Mara had hit them so perfectly. 2 of them were behind a curtain with a little hole. So they weren't, for us, they weren't glowing. There was one outside the door that was kind of like, oh, hello, hi there, not hello world. But overall, in terms of that was fine tuning some of the craft, but the performance itself, the big stuff, that was, we talked about it. It was neither theater nor television. It was a new hybrid thing. So it was really, sometimes it was really discombobulating. But overall,
I will say this too. It really,
go ahead.
It really was a reliance on you as well. Like because you were everything. You were audience, you were director, you were all the feedback we were getting. So it amplified to me your role, and thank goodness you're kind and supportive and
professional.
So,
You know, it's interesting from the directing point of view too, for the same reasons, is usually a director can feel the room. I mean, that's what, you know, that's a director's job, is to anticipate how an audience will react, you know, to be that audience of one. And part of that comes through the feel the room. Is you get the sense of how are the actors feeling, what vibe am I getting here, you know, I'm, you know, I'm in this office, you know, doing what we're doing here on Zoom, you know, all day long, every day. And so it's disconcerting as a director too. It's learning a different vocabulary. It's learning, you know, how to try to give notes in ways that are more suited to this reality. And you know, as a director, there are times when I just like to get up and walk up on stage and have a more personal conversation with the actors. You know, have just kind of more something that's not being broadcast to, you know, the whole world. And that, you know, we can't just jump off into our own little breakout room and, you know, and have those conversations. So it is, but I have to tell you, I am so happy with the work you guys did in this process, and you know, your commitment to what I know was a strange environment. You know, again, like working in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, you guys are you know, actors and crew and makeup artists, and you know, you're all wrapped up into one. And so you know, I'm so appreciative of, you know, everything you did and everything you were willing to do, and how fun it was to create, while we mourned the fact that we weren't in a theater creating it for an audience. That's the missing link, right? Is that you never ever got the payoff of the audience response.
and
Go ahead.
and I was going to say that you know, usually in a performance, when you're done rehearsing, you have a couple of previews, and then your opening night, and then the run, and you'll see patrons who come to the previews or come to opening night, and then they'll come back at the end of the run because they know that it changes as you settle, as you feel more confident as you play. But in this case, we're done with rehearsal. The two previews are on camera, and you know, so we taped 4 times, and then that was it. There's no growth. You didn't get the, you know, the run. So it just happens fast. It happens. You're just making choices fast. By the time we found our groove,
it was like poof, it's gone.
I know that. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just you know, when you back to the point on even size and volume and gesture, you know, things that we take for granted because we work really hard on our craft, like literally every day in some way, shape, or form. So to be at that much of a loss at times was really, it was refreshing in a lot of ways. Actually, it was like, at first I was so angry, like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? But then I went, okay, this is new. This is something new. Embrace it. Because for people wondering, the space that we were in was about 6 feet 2 inches tall. So it was only this far above our heads, about 16 feet long, and less than 6 feet across. And that's with furniture in there. So we had about 1.5 feet width to get by each other. So like this submarine idea you're talking about, you know, the environment itself that amplified it up really did ramp it up and did intensify it, at least for us. I hope it transferred to the film itself, but for us, it did. It created this claustrophobia, created, and even back to your first question, created this extra energy that we were trying to put into the performance. Where we would get in our heads a bit is, you know, if you raised your volume inside the space, it was just like so epically loud. We're using theater, we're theater actors, and we're in this, you know, 90 square foot space going, rah, 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 you know, like the Claudius monologue here. And I'm like, okay, bring it down. And yeah, and so we didn't, like Dawn said, because she did so much TV. I said, well, what's that like? What did you use to gauge? And she said, we would get the dailies. We would actually get raw footage so I can see, oh, I'm leaving frame, or I'm using my hands too much, or, you know, how to dial it in for that particular lens. And because this is not, you know, this is neither, it was like, I hope it's good. And then we just do it again. We're like, tomorrow, we would give each other like sort of these things of like, I'm just going to listen. You know, I know it's acting 101, but we had to go back to that, which was exciting in a lot of ways, to go, all right, let's get back to the fundamentals here and stop getting in our heads.
You know, one of my toughest jobs in the whole process was taking we recorded it 4 times, start to finish. Then one of my jobs was to watch all 4 tapes and decide and pick one.
Yeah.
Because we weren't going to splice a bunch of them together. We didn't want to do that. Right. We wanted to pick one of them. And I sat here with different screens and watched these things side by side on each for me, I was watching 3 screens all the time because there were 3 cameras. So I was seeing 3 camera feeds on each of my computer screens simultaneously. So at one point, you know, I had six screens open, trying to, you know, seeing how everything evolved in real time. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating. But that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do, was pick one of the 4, because they were all different little things, you know, in each one. Anyway, I want to get back to, as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to get back to this thing you mentioned, Dawn. You talked about your nonprofit. You and Stephan have a nonprofit. And I remember, Stephan, the first time I encountered you was in a production in the city, in New York City, of Cry Havoc on 42nd Street, I recall. And you combined Cry Havoc with an amazing conversation with the audience. And I was so thrilled to experience that as an audience member. But tell us, you have a nonprofit called Decruit.
Yes, yeah. I'm I'm a military veteran, and I left the Army in part because I saw Richard III, Shakespeare's Richard III, who's a veteran, talking about, you know, it opens with a veteran on stage saying, I was really good in the military. I was really good at it. And I'm really awful at the other side of it, being in the real world. And now my military service is over. And what I deemed as the question was, now what? Now what do I do? And the word now is in that famous opening prologue of Richard's 4 or 5 times. You know, now is the winter of our discontent, and now. And I was experiencing that. And theater was giving me the things that I needed to create the transition from the military. And it was helping me realize how much the military puts in effort of recruiting us and then training us for war, or as I call it, wiring us for war, or more correctly, Twyla Tharp gave me that phrase, wiring us for war, but not unwiring us for war, not untraining us, just dumping us back into society, because it's not their job to do so. At least we haven't made it their job. So for me, theater was my decruiting. I was recruited, but not decruited. And I found theater, and in particular for me, Shakespeare, to be a medicine that was helping me not only identify my post-traumatic stress disorder, but to help begin healing it or rewiring it. And the show Cry Havoc was a direct result of me trying to figure out what is, you know, I started with the question, what the hell's wrong with me, when I started that play. And that was my answer, was this is what happened to me to get me here. Decruit was the answer to, now how do I undo that? And when Dawn and I met, it was not called Decruit yet. I was working with Shakespearean veterans. She was sharing, although she's not a veteran, with her experiences, said, yeah, no, I experienced that as well for different reasons, which are hers to share. And then we helped craft this nonprofit through a small team, Alicia Ali out of NYU, who's a doctor in psychology, and other team members, as well as veterans, of distilling this down into a deliverable program to where we can go out to communities and actually teach them what we're doing for free, and they can continue doing it. Not dissimilar to Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I mean by that is the idea being, go to any community, it's free, delivered relatively the same way. And it's we do consider it a treatment program. And that's where the van came into play. Dawn was, paying for Decruit by working a job as a general manager at a restaurant, swanky restaurant in New York. And when I pitched to her, hey, I'm thinking of getting a van to cut down costs to go out and work around the country, she said, I'm not living in a van. I'm like, no. It's an idea. And she hadn't seen what the van life was yet. I knew she was thinking the same thing I was, because we're kids of the 60s and 70s. So I knew she was thinking those old vans with the side rails and the furniture, the lazy boys.
Wall carpeting.
Yes, yeah. And you have to duck down. I'm like, no. She's like, I'm not living in a van, not living in a van. And then one particular day when it was becoming a reality, she came home from work. It was really rough. And she just said, show me. And I knew what she meant right away, showed her the whole proposal. And she's like, let's do it. Let's just make this happen. And we didn't really even have bookings at that point. We had communities that were interested in Decruit, but no funding. But then lo and behold, the more we did it, the more people stepped up and said, hey, I want to support that. I want to donate to it. And it really has been an absolute, we hear this term, grassroots or ground level nonprofit. That is, we're solely through, we don't really get grants or any of that stuff. We're all donations, traveling around now to 5 countries, treating trauma through Shakespeare and science.
And right now we have Decruit New York that's running Friday night, in Fort Worth, Texas, Tuesday and Thursday. And this May, Stephan will do an online one again. But what's fantastic about the program is, especially because we're mobile, we can go into communities and spend time. This isn't just a one-off of going in and reading and leaving, or performing and then leaving. It's actually, we were patient zero. And it's actually all of the tools that we've learned through decades of not just doing theater work, but also investigating what happened to us, which is the question, what's wrong with me, morphed into what happened to me. And so we put everything in with the help of doctors, and now we deliver this program in 3 to 8 weeks, depending on how long we're able to go into the community. And what's so special about it is that the final presentation, the community gets to come into the theater and hear from their own veterans. So that's not a Hollywood version of what happened or anyone else's version. It's the people, the veterans in their own community, speaking their truth and asking for what they need. And then what's so beautiful is that community members step up, and we've seen the most extraordinary exchanges happen where dentists have said, hey, I'm a dentist. I'll do teeth cleanings for any veterans that come to my office. Here's my card. I'm a psychiatrist. I have an open hour every week I'll give to a vet. And so then you have people not waiting for help from any outside source, but inside resourcing. And that to me is a strength that nobody can take away from you. If you build community and the community is helping each other and hearing each other and solving problems together, there's nothing better than that. So I am also very proud of the fact that veteran founded and informed, but over 200 veterans really helped create the program. So we dealt with the community that we were serving.
Committed, concerned civilians that were involved as well.
Yeah, so I really love that that it was created in that way. Yeah.
Well, it's incredibly significant work that you guys are doing and making a difference in so many lives all over the country. And so thank you for doing that. Thank you also for joining us today, for talking about creating Annapurna, for opening up your home to us, to help tell this story. It's been such a pleasure for me professionally and personally to get to work with both of you over this process, and so thrilled to share Annapurna with our audience, and so excited to have giving them some insight and behind the scenes look at creating Annapurna. So Dawn, Stephan, thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you both back at Syracuse Stage real soon.
I hope so. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Thank you.